Carl Sagan, the pale blue dot. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and every sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, and how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit, yes. Settle, not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. In 1964, Soviet astronomer Nikita Kardashev proposed a method by which to measure the technological advancement of a civilization. There's Type 1, a world society which has progressed far enough to harness all of the energy on its home planet, and has begun to cautiously observe the night sky for signs of extraterrestrial life, while taking its own first timid steps into colonizing neighboring planets. This is the type which is closest to us here on Earth, but we're still not quite there. Our global industries are reliant on non-renewable energy, and geopolitical disputes make ventures such as sustainable fusion power and space travel far-fetched, to say the least. Maybe we'll get there in a few hundred years or so, provided that we're still around. If we do achieve a Type 1 civilization, what do you think human society would look like? A united Earth, which has long cast aside the outdated concepts of nations, defense pacts, resource wars, racial and religious persecution. With our new antimatter reactors, which are magnitudes more powerful than modern nuclear power plants, we could use the moon as a staging ground for the United Earth Space Force, sending rockets full of scientists and machines to Mars to terraform its surface and make it habitable for humans, and then tap into its bountiful resources to build even more rockets and begin sending them into deep space. By the year 4000, the Great Republic of Earth has brought the entire solar system into its sphere of influence, and they've officially entered Type 2 civilization. Bored of life on our pale blue dot? Take your family on vacation and visit the rings of Saturn, or dive beneath the beautiful crystalline surface of Callisto into New Atlantis, a country entirely encased within a massive transparent dome, so we can peek out and get a glimpse of the new bioengineered aquatic life forms the scientists have been working on. You homesick? Fly back to our humble Earth, where we've constructed great floating cities that hover above the beautiful Terran landscape so as not to disturb the ever-curious wildlife. Relive the Battle of Constantinople, or the signing of the Declaration of Independence in high-power memory chambers. Sit down and enjoy a dinner among the stars with your family, or spend a few years in blissful virtual reality with your friends. All this made possible by the Republic of Earth's crowning achievement, the Dyson Swarm. A megastructure of orbital solar panels completely covering the surface of the sun to harness 100% of its energy output. You're grateful for the wondrous luxuries you enjoy, the product of millennia of human innovation and brotherhood. But you wonder what life will look like, say, 1,000,000 years from now. A Type 3 humanity would be indistinguishable from gods if we were to observe them. Having long conquered our local solar system, we have ventured out into every corner of the galaxy, built 1,000,000,000,000 Dyson spheres just because we can, and evolved beyond the need for material bodies or even minds. To say the phrase Milky Way Empire may be a simple thing, but to imagine a unified civilization which has managed to gain dominion over an entire galaxy is beyond our current mental limits. If you're bummed that we'll never live to see this, think of it this way. If you imagine human existence as a timeline beginning with the emergence of the earliest human ancestors and ending at a Type 3 mega-civilization, we're about halfway there. So if you ask me, I think we're making pretty good time. Now, I think the Kardashev scale makes, a pretty intuitive sense to a degree, basing civilization's technical advancement based on the amount of energy they're able to harness, starting with their home world, their solar system, and an entire galaxy, respectively, from types 1 to 3. First of all, the idea that like a given civilization would start out from a small place and just continually like spread and spread and spread its influence, even when they're doing great and can more than sustain themselves, but they just keep expanding their sphere of influence, I think is a very it's a very human-centric idea, isn't it? To just want more and more and more, even when we have plenty to provide for everyone. So how could we know that if there is life out there, that they would think the same way that we do? For that matter, if there is life out there, how do we know that it will adhere to this model? Maybe there are ways that technology can advance that we haven't even thought of before, that will make scales like this obsolete. For example, instead of growing and growing to conquer the entire galaxy at some point, maybe they just, as a society, retreat into virtual reality and just keep improving and improving that fictional world that they're living in, and that's what they dedicate themselves to, maybe. But as far as technology goes, the weird thing, I think, is that we don't know the upper limits of technology. because relatively speaking, there are a lot of things about the universe that we don't know, right? Dark matter, dark energy, the reason that the universe is rapidly expanding and things are getting further apart. We have ideas, but there are a lot of things we don't know for sure. And until we know the extent of science, how can we possibly know the extent of technology? It's impossible to say. Maybe our potential just like caps out somewhere. Maybe we reach the point where we're able to like colonize Mars or something, but we just hit a brick wall that we're too stupid to get past. I don't know, maybe. I would like to think that humans are smarter than that, but hey, you never know. However, there's an even bigger problem with the Kardashev scale that would, if it's true, invalidate the whole thing. And that is, if this is used to chart the potential technological advancement of alien civilizations other than us out there in the universe, how do we know that there's anything else? If this seems like a common sense, the Kardashev scale, a civilization gets more and more advanced and expands outwards and outwards and outwards, if we take that as true, then where are all the aliens? I mean, surely over the, 13 some odd billion years that the universe has existed, that we can trace back to, somewhere in the vast cosmos, some society would advance long enough and try hard enough at it that they would reach something like at least a Type 2 civilization, right? And if a civilization controlled a whole galaxy, they'd be doing massive terraforming and there'd be space stations and everything, but we have no evidence to suggest that there's anything but us. And that's kind of a worrying thought. Or maybe not worrying, just kind of confusing and hard to wrap your head around. Like, of course, we live our lives as if this is all that we have. Like, because obviously we're not going to be thinking about like the vast universe while we're just going about our day. But imagine for 1 second that it's true that we are the only planet with life on it. We were the first. And maybe the only one that'll ever be. Maybe the conditions to create life are just so stupidly rare that we just happen to be the first ones to do it. Maybe it's even more difficult for abiogenesis to happen than we previously thought. Okay, well, let's try to think about this from a bigger perspective. Okay, the question, where are all the aliens, it's a pretty old one. In 1950, we decided on a name for it, the Fermi paradox, which basically says if the universe is infinite, and there's theoretically an infinite amount of chances for life to spontaneously develop, where are all the aliens? We want to know, right? If there are billions of stars in the Milky Way that are likely to support life, that are similar in Earth in their atmospheric makeup, then surely there's life somewhere else, at least in the galaxy. I mean, forget the galaxy even. In the universe? Trillions and trillions of stars. Where is everybody? Especially considering the fact that, as far as we know, our sun, our star, is relatively young compared to a lot of the other stars in the universe. So, a lot of other galaxies have a head start, right? So, there are a couple of hypothetical explanations for the Fermi paradox, and I want to talk about some of the more interesting ones. One of them we've already talked about, which is the hypothesis that, well, basically, life really is that rare, and we're just the first. Perhaps there is life out there somewhere, but we're just more advanced from them. Maybe it's just the super early stages of cellular life, where there's like bacteria hidden on Jupiter or something. not Jupiter because it's a gas giant, right? Okay, maybe there's bacteria on Pluto, right? But we're not going to be able to identify it because it's not like bacteria can communicate with us. So we just have no way to contact these less developed alien civilizations. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe we're the bacteria, right? And it's that there are other living civilizations out there among the stars, but they're way more advanced than us. They're type 3 or even type 2 civilizations that, they look at Earth and are like, it's not even worth it. They're so stupid. Look at them on their stupid little blue and green planet. I mean, we've got galaxies to conquer. Why would we even bother with them? So maybe there are signs of extraterrestrial life, but we just haven't recognized them because they don't look like anything that would possibly be familiar to us. I mean, that's the very definition of alien. Here's a kind of depressing one. Maybe the universe is filled with living civilizations, and they're asking the same questions that we are. Where is everybody? Why does it seem like when we look up at this brilliant night sky and see trillions of stars, we don't see any other signs of life? And there's a whole bunch of different planets asking that, not really realizing that everyone is just too far away from each other. We're just randomly placed, and even if we did detect alien life somewhere, odds are it's going to be like, a million light years away. And even if we were to somehow learn to travel at light speed, it would still take us like thousands and thousands of years to get there. So what would even be the point, right? I mean, wouldn't it suck if we found like definite alien life, but it's in like the Andromeda galaxy or something? So there's no way that we're ever gonna be able to actually like communicate with them, much less visit. That would be kind of a downer, wouldn't it? I mean, we humans, we want to see aliens. Like, wouldn't that be cool to see other life, to study them, and see how they're alike and how they're different from us? Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, according to this other big explanation, no. This says that if we do find even signs of alien life, that is a very, very bad thing. So this leads into the concept of what is called the Great Filter. And what that basically is it's the idea that life and civilization have to go through a couple of big filters in order to become successful. Of course, like the big one is just coming into existence through abiogenesis, or who knows, intelligent design. But that's the big one, obviously. But then we have to develop multicellular life, which is another really difficult thing to do that takes a long time. And we keep going through these filters, and the idea is they become more rigid and more rigid over time, so that theoretically, less and less civilizations are surviving. So that prompts the question, right? Is that the big question, are humans past or behind the big, like, Great Filter? Are we good to go? Have we succeeded? Are we, the first ones to do it, and it's a brave new world? Or has this happened, like, billions or trillions of times already, but there's something ahead of us that's gonna end it all, and either stop our advancement forever, or set us back, and the cycle continues and continues? Now, the reason, if we found the signs of life elsewhere in the galaxy, that it would be really bad, because, well, that implies that the filter is ahead of us, right? If we come into direct evidence that there was an alien civilization, but it doesn't exist anymore, that means it was filtered out. It didn't pass. So what is that big requirement that we've either passed or have yet to pass or yet to encounter? Maybe it is technically possible that a civilization could reach Type 3 if given enough time, but the issue is extinction events are just too common. Like, imagine if, we're all advanced and we're getting ready to explore the galaxy and we solved all of our problems and we think we've won, but then one day a big meteor hits us and that's over. Like, all traces of us are gone, and life on Earth has to restart again. Like it was all for nothing. Or maybe life is destined to destroy itself. Maybe there's something that we haven't quite discovered yet in science, that, like, the instant a civilization discovers it, they misuse it and it destroys all life. Or maybe we've already encountered it, but we don't know it yet. Maybe if we delve too far into nuclear technology, it'll just destroy us one day because it kills the atmosphere or something. Or maybe life destroys itself through unintentional climate change. It's just too big a task to switch to renewable energy, and civilizations just inevitably end up poisoning themselves and killing any of their chances to expand out into the galaxy. Maybe. Or, kind of the most depressing one, maybe life is just destined to always destroy itself. Maybe it is just the inevitable fate of all forms of life itself as a concept, that nobody ever gets a chance to go out and explore the galaxy because they can't get over their own internal differences. And a united Earth just isn't possible, for example, because one way or another, there's going to be like a big war or something, and we obliterate ourselves. Maybe the great filter is that a planetary civilization, life, has to find a way to come together and unite by recognizing all of the things that we have in common instead of destroying each other because of our small differences. And maybe that's just a super rare thing for the entire universe. Okay, but what if we set all that aside, and against all odds, one day, in the near future, we discover alien life, and they're either, at our tech level, or just a little bit beyond us. As cool and exciting as that idea may sound, I think we can pretty safely say that we don't want that at all. Because in that event, in all likelihood, there's gonna be a couple of likely scenarios. Let's say scenario 1. We don't find alien life because alien life finds us, because they're more technologically advanced than we are. They arrive in these big rocket ships and they're like way smarter than we are, and they're all united, and we, can't get our shit together. Well, let's think about the implications here, because what does history tell us? What happens when a civilization comes into contact with a technologically inferior people who happen to live on land that they want, that would be useful to them as far as resources? Now, we don't know whether alien life would have empathy like we do or not. It could be. But in this event, I'm gonna be hedging my bets on the idea that no, they're not empathetic like we are, and they're gonna harvest our organs and like suck Earth dry because they're colonizing us. And we would be an inconvenience to their conquest that would be better off exterminated. Geez, that kind of reminds me of something in human history, but I just can't... it's on the tip of my tongue. I'll let you know if I think about it. But let's maybe if we look at scenario 2, that'll tell us. So scenario 2 is the opposite event, in which humans travel out into the galaxy, and we find a civilization that is less advanced than we are. Now, disclaimer. I am convinced that most humans are basically good, and most people possess basic empathy. I am not convinced, however, that authority can usually be trusted to make the right moral decisions. So, if some kind of Earth government were to encounter an inferior, quote unquote, inferior species, at least as far as technology, somewhere nearby, my bet is that they would treat them, like they weren't alive. And they would exterminate them, like we assume they would exterminate us. And then we harvest their planet and move on, because we don't care. I mean, do you honestly think that if the governments of the world right now were to encounter an alien species, and they even appeared to be anything resembling a threat, that we would just find ways to peacefully coexist with them? I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, but no, at this stage of humanity, I would not trust them to make that kind of decision. So, assuming that aliens are anything like us, as far as intelligence, both of these scenarios seem like losses. Either we exterminate an innocent population, or we're exterminated. And neither of those, to me, seem like desirable options. Maybe you disagree, but yeah, I'm leaning towards none of the above right now. So it's looking like maybe we really don't want to find aliens because of the implications. But hey, say we did, and like I mentioned a bit ago, we don't really trust the authority of modern human governments to make the right calls if we were to encounter alien life. So that prompts the question, of course, who would possess the right to represent Earth in the event that the need arose? Who would we delegate that all-important task to? Well, here's what worries me about that. So, it looks like the United States and really most of the other big superpowers of the world, they're not really interested in exploring space. Which I get, there are more pressing things going on than, like, searching for alien life on Jupiter or something. Like, I get that. So, if governments don't pick up the slack and start doing space stuff again, well, the private sector is gonna do it first. And I don't know how I feel about Elon Musk colonizing Mars for his corporation and him just owning it. Now, of course, there are technically treaties and stuff about outer space that no countries can, claim extraterrestrial bodies or whatever, but well, a private corporation, technically, isn't a government or a state. So, who would stop Elon Musk from turning Mars into his own personal, special harem paradise or something? What if humans do emanate out into the greater universe, but that emanation and that advancement is driven by private interests, who are pursuing the endeavor not for the sake of exploration and discovery and the betterment of all of the human race, but for a profit motive? Well, we would go from a dictatorship of capital on our own planet, and we would export it out to the wider universe and replicate the same thing over and over, when I myself, and I feel like a lot of people agree with me, if there is potential to settle other habitable worlds in the universe, maybe that would be a good time to, try something a little different? I don't know, maybe try some kind of new form of government or new economic system other than neoliberal capitalism once we get into space? Like, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, I think most everyone would agree that, it's sad to say, but the history of Earth and the way it's tended towards economically and socially isn't too good. So why shouldn't we, find ways to maybe restart and reset, give ourselves another chance? I mean, imagine it. If humans were given another chance, but that chance was squandered because it was wasted on providing for the profit motives of the rich, rather than humanity as a whole. Basically, my big question here is, of all the things that we could export out into the universe, Do we really want it to be capitalism? I don't know. I'm not sold on that one, but maybe you disagree. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that space and the great unknown, it's the last thing that we people have that isn't corrupted by greed and advertisement and dumb human stuff like that. Like, we can still look up into the night sky and see the stars, more or less. And what if in 2 or 100 years we look up and we can't see the stars anymore because it's a bunch of like advertisements on big drones blocking out the view of the universe with beams of light advertising, I don't know, the new Adidas or whatever. Season 67 of Keeping Up with the Kardashians is would giving up space be worth that? I don't know. But for all this talk of aliens, outer space, and the distant future, I think that these speculative conversations and theories, however interesting they may be and fun to imagine, I think our obsession with it stems from this unspoken yet crippling anxiety that has come about as a natural and fabricated response to a world that is increasingly hostile to meaningful personal relationships, intellectual freedom, and dignity of labor. We prescribe the word alien to extraterrestrial life forms, but its origins are much more earthly. Increasingly, I can't help but feel as if aliens are absolutely real, but they're not in space. They're all around us. Not in the sense that your best friend is actually some kind of crazy tentacle monster from space, but that we're becoming more and more detached from our surroundings and the people around us, that eventually nothing will be familiar, and that we're becoming a society of lonely planets orbiting around in space, slowly coming to the realization that this may be all we have. We fascinate ourselves with these fantastic tales about aliens and outer space so much that we can't realize the alienation that's going on around us. If you'll humor me, take a look around wherever you are. Chances are you're surrounded by what in theory is called commodities, economic goods that are produced and then exchanged. Your coffee cup, your smartphone, the clothes you're wearing, etc. How often do you think about where all these commodities come from? Well, I went to the store and got them, or went online and bought them. But that's only the most recent step in the process of production and consumption. Where do all these commodities really come from? Not in the sense of the final exchange, but their initial production. Sometimes we look around at all our possessions, and they almost have a kind of supernatural essence to them. At some point in an unknowable amount of time in the past, they just kind of popped into existence. You bought them, probably through retail, and now they're yours. But that's not the full story though, is it? Before it was sold to you, it was probably kept in a big warehouse, along with all the other commodities, about to be put into circulation in the market. The workers at the warehouse were almost certainly overworked, underpaid, and constantly at risk of losing their jobs and not being able to pay their bills or buy food. If your product was one of the 1.6 million or so packages processed through Amazon warehouses daily, you can pretty much be sure that it passed through the hands of a dozen or so exhausted workers desperately trying to meet their quotas to avoid getting fired on the spot, even if it comes at the cost of horrible injuries like falling off ladders and breaking their backs, or passing out from dehydration due to lack of water breaks, or dying from a sudden heart attack on the concrete floor. Before it reached the warehouse, though, it was, in all likelihood, made overseas by sweatshop labor, especially the clothes and shoes you're wearing, or your smartphone that probably came from a factory in China where workers jump off rooftops to their deaths because the stress of up to 180 hours a month on slave wage was too much for them. Or maybe one of the 250 million children around the world working in sweatshops, mostly young girls, where, if you're lucky, you're in Costa Rica making the equivalent of about $2.38 an hour. But if you're not, maybe you're in Bangladesh, where it's just 13 cents an hour. All these cumulative thousands of hours of greed, suffering, and cruelty culminating in this cup of coffee, or this iPhone, or 90% of all the other commodities I surround myself with every day. One simple thing means all that. I mean, all these objects, they seem like such trivial things when you just look at them. They're just products. You don't think about where they come from. Someone just sells them to you based on how much they think you're willing to pay. Never mind all the steps it took to get there. Because you are as alienated from the reality of the commodity as the people who made the commodity are alienated from the profit that it generates. In a world where our relationships and our lives revolved around each other instead of our things, maybe life could be different. But that's not the world we live in. Our worth and our ability to influence society are totally based upon our capital and our material wealth, and not much else. They tell us that it's just human nature to do it this way, but does any of this really feel natural to you? A society based totally upon the trust that its citizens don't think too hard about why they have the things they have, kept docile by hours of mindlessly scrolling through Twitter or Instagram, constantly worried about their medical bills or student loans, and fed a constant stream of propaganda and misinformation by the media they consume, abandoning all their privacy and dignity for the sake of convenience, and falling for the illusion of choice in how things are run, when the few people with actual power know that no matter who's in office, they will always win. Commodity fetishism. It's a term that means the perception of certain relationships, especially production and exchange, not as relationships among people, but as social relationships among things, the money and commodities exchanged in market trade. Perceiving value as something that arises from and resides within the commodity goods themselves, and not from the series of interpersonal relations that produce the commodity and evolve its value. And because we've all just learned to live with it, because to do otherwise would be too painful, we've been tricked into valuing our commodities, our things, more than we value life, ourselves. I mean, think about every decision the government makes and ask yourself whether their primary concern is making people's lives better or money, making sure the rich stay rich. I mean, we don't matter to them. At most, we're a bundle of data points, neatly arranged in their supercomputers, where they compile every detail of our lives to figure out what to sell us. I mean, we're not even people, just cogs in a great and horrifying machine where we either fulfill our role as set by someone above us, or we're cast aside. Social alienation under the capitalist mode of production. That means the loss of the ability to determine life and destiny when deprived of the right to conceive of oneself as the director of their own actions, their goals and activities instead being dictated by the ruling class for the purpose of making as much profit as possible, regardless of the human cost. So maybe we are all just timid astronomers, peering into our telescopes in search of meaning, and real happiness and self-worth, but seeing no signs of life. Only further confirmation that we really are alone in a vast, dark, cold, and uncaring universe. Because we were the aliens the whole time. So how do you live after taking all of this into account? Because it seems like our only two options are to surrender to total despair at our inability to affect the world around us, or just ignore it all and live this crude simulacra of life, only pretending that you're actually living. In the course of learning more and more about the world and wondering for years about how I and the people I love fall into it, I've had to ask myself the question of how to go on so many times. But I do think there's another option. The first step to happiness is acceptance, always, regardless of the circumstance. I'm only one person, and so I can only affect the world to such a degree. If there are things outside my control that I feel are wrong, what good can come of blaming myself for them? To feel despair over things I can't change and surrender to the crushing weight of the world. Instead, why not come to terms with reality as it is, and in recognizing that I'm only one person, give myself the permission and the will to do my best with what I'm given. Not to become complacent with the state of things, but to accept them, and if it's within your ability, to examine the world around you and reconcile it with your internal desire for happiness and the happiness of others, to find ways to change things for the better however you can. Because to say, I'm only one person, isn't something to be ashamed of. It's a battle cry. You're not the things you own. You are not the imperfect perceptions of other people. You're not the things that are outside your control. You're not an alien. You're a fucking human being. And if the most we can do to change the world is just to show up, to be there in spite of everything, then that's enough for me. That's stoicism. Not the act of giving up or not caring, but the act of acceptance. Because what else is there? Thank you for listening. Good night.